Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last day of Voyagers. We've read Trapped by the Ice, which is Shackleton's story, and you're going to compare that story with one you're going to read that's found on Epic. You can see I'm on Epic right here, and Alone in the Arctic, Can Science Save Your Life? So I'm going to click on that, and here's the story. And I'm going to begin reading it to you. You'll notice that the table of contents here says Joe's story, Where is the Arctic? Now notice this is not Antarctic like Shackleton's story. This is Arctic. What animals live there? Exactly how cold? What is an iceberg? How do you build an igloo? Fish of the Arctic. How do you catch fish? And who lives in the Arctic? And what happens if the ice cap melts? And then we have Why is Joe there? Glossary, learn more, and index. All right, Joe's story. Hi, my name is Joe, and I have a story to tell you, a real adventure. I got stranded on the ice. I thought I wouldn't make it back to safety of the base, but I did, just barely. I managed to survive with the help of all the science I know, but it's a long story. This story gets really chilly. Everyone huddle up and I'll begin. My story is set here in the Arctic. I imagine you know where that is, the most northern part of the globe surrounding the North Pole. It's very cold up here. Ice and snow stretches into the distances as far as the eye can see. Ice and snow and not much else. So if you notice here we are in the United States of America. There we are in Minnesota, right around there. And then the North Pole is at the top, and you'll notice that's the Arctic. The South Pole is called the Antarctic. Where is the Arctic? The Arctic is the region around the North Pole. There is no land there, only sea and ice. In fact, the Arctic is a large frozen ocean or ice sheet that never completely melts. The Arctic ice sheet is bordered by 6 countries. They are Canada, Russia, Finland, Norway, Greenland, and the United States. The largest ice shelf in the Arctic is the Ward Hunt Ice Shelf. The single piece of ice is the size of 11,000 soccer fields. However, this ice shelf is beginning to melt and break apart because Earth is warming up. During the short summers, the ice sheet shrinks. In winter, when the temperature drops, it grows again. Well, maybe you'll see a walrus or two. Big, gray, blubbery walruses with 2 long tusks. Oh, and seals. There are a few seals, and silvery white foxes, and owls, and polar bears. Okay, so maybe it isn't just ice and snow. So what animals live there? Here's a walrus. Thick layers of fat called blubber keep a walrus warm in icy waters. This caption says, Harp seals are gray, but the babies are white, making them hard to see. The Arctic or snowy owl has lots of thick feathers on its feet. The fur of the Arctic fox is brown in summer and white in winter. Polar bears dig homes called dens in the snow. You're getting impatient. You want to hear the story. Well, my fellow scientists and I were in the Arctic to study the changes in the ice. We were heading back to our base at the weather station. On the way, a blizzard blew up. You don't want to be out on the ice in a blizzard. Howling gales, freezing your clothing. Blinding snow, freezing your hair. Icy winds, freezing your breath. Brr, it was cold like you never felt in your life. Well, exactly how cold? The Arctic climate has cold winters and cool summers. There's not much rainfall. When there is, it falls as snow. High winds often stir up snow, and this makes it seem as if snow is falling all the time. In winter, the temperature can be as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is also -40 degrees Celsius. The coldest it has ever been was -90 degrees Fahrenheit. You know how cold the food in your refrigerator's freezer gets? That's only about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, -18 degrees Celsius. So the Arctic is a lot colder. We know that the freezing point of water is 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. And ice cream stays frozen in your freezer at 23 degrees Fahrenheit or -5 Celsius. If the temperature increases, it will start to melt. Just trying to turn the page here. Go ahead. There we go. Racing across, oh, did I skip a page? Let me just see. Nope. Sorry. Racing across the ice on our snowmobiles, we were moving in a long line. I was at the back, quite a long way back, and suddenly, crack, crack, the ice broke in front of me. I jumped off my snowmobile and called after them, but no one heard and no one looked back. The line moved on, and I soon lost sight of them. I was alone. I sat down on my backpack and wondered what to do. I was stuck on a piece of ice that had broken free and was drifting into the ocean. I sat on the edge of the ice and tried to convince myself how great it was to be living on an iceberg, but it wasn't. I knew I had to build myself a shelter. But what with? Oh, and then I remembered the native Inuit build shelters out of ice. Well, why couldn't I? So what is an iceberg? An iceberg is a large piece of ice made of fresh water that is broken off from a glacier or ice shelf. To be classified as an iceberg, it must be 50 feet or 15 meters long and 16 feet or 5 meters above the water, or it is just a piece of floating ice. Only about 1/9 of an iceberg can be seen from above the water. Notice that a lot is below the water. How do you build an igloo? The snow used to build an igloo must have enough strength to be cut and stacked in a spiral pattern. An igloo needs to be built in a dome shape. A dome uses ice blocks that lock together to make a very light but very strong structure. Separate blocks are stacked on top of each other and rubbed into the shape at the end. Sometimes a short tunnel is constructed at the entrance to reduce heat loss when the door is opened. Snow blown by the wind makes the best building material. It is more packed and the ice crystals are connected tightly together. Pockets of air inside the snow provide good insulation, keeping the heat in. The heat from a lamp inside the igloo also makes the inside walls of the blocks melt slightly. This melting and freezing packs the ice blocks together. Outside it might be -49 degrees Fahrenheit, but on the inside, your body heat alone keeps it closer to 19 degrees Fahrenheit. An igloo that is built correctly will support the weight of a person standing on its roof. The roofs of mosques and many other religious or government buildings around the world are dome-shaped. There's the finished igloo. Just trying to turn the page again. There we go. I was pretty pleased with my igloo, but all the hard work had made me hungry. Where would I find food? I remembered a trick that is used by the local people. They cut a hole in the ice, put bait on a fishing line, and dangle the bait in the sea. When a fish bites, they spear it and pull it out of the hole. I found what I needed in my backpack, and at last I caught a fish. I cut it into thin strips. It tasted good. Some fish in the Arctic are cod, skate, a shark, flatfish, lumpsucker. This picture shows an Inuit woman jigging for fish through a hole in the ice. Looks like she caught quite a few fish. How do you catch fish? Inuits catch fish using a skill called jigging. The hunter cuts a hole in the ice and fishes using a fake fish attached to a line as bait. They lower this into the water and move it around as if it were real. When the fish approaches, they spear the fish before it has a chance to eat the bait. Who lives in the Arctic? Many people live in the Arctic despite of the cold. Of course, life is hard, and people have learned to be hardy to survive. The Inuit people live in Canada and Greenland. They protect themselves from the bitter cold with clothing made from reindeer and seal skins and the furs of wolves and polar bears. To move from place to place, the Inuit uses snow machines called snowmobiles. They wear skis and wide-soled snowshoes so their feet won't sink into the soft snow. The Lapp people live in northern Scandinavia. They used to move from place to place with their herds of reindeer. Today, most Lapps do not follow the traditional nomadic life and live in cities instead. Here's a picture of a snowmobile, and here's an Inuit family. The Chukchi people of Arctic Russia used to hunt walruses and whales in canoes called kayaks. The boats were made of skin stretched over a frame. Today they use motorboats and snowmobiles. Back to the story. I was beginning to feel quite lonely. I needed someone to talk to. and I was beginning to get worried about my floating home. It was definitely getting smaller. The ice that made up my small iceberg was melting, much like it was melting up on the whole Arctic ice cap. Scientists have been studying the effects of global warming, the gradual rise in Earth's temperature, for many years. When people burn coal, gas, and oil, it releases more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This buildup of gas holds more heat in and warms the Earth. The picture shows a scientist measuring samples of ice to record its length. The Arctic has suffered more than any other part of the planet from global warming. The polar ice that makes up the whole region is melting so fast that it may be gone in as few as 20 years. What happens if the ice cap melts? As the ice sheets melt and release water into the seas, the level of oceans rise. Over time, this will cause flooding in many parts of the world. Close to sea level, soil will be washed away and homes and crops will be damaged. In 1984, that's a picture of the ice cap, and in 2012, part of the ice cap is already melted. The oceans influence weather on Earth. The temperature of ocean waters plays a big part in creating storms and hurricanes, which cause flooding and destruction. Trying to turn the page again, it's a little difficult. I was beginning to feel quite lonely. I needed someone to talk to, and I was beginning to get worried about my floating home. It was definitely getting smaller. The ice that made up my small iceberg was melting, much as it was the whole Arctic ice cap. So we've already seen this one. Good, I said. Now I have some wildlife to enjoy. All that day, the wildlife just kept coming to me. A family of seals, 2 snow geese, a snowy owl, and a polar bear. We were quite a strange family, more like a floating zoo. You can tell this is the part, a lot of this story is fictional, right? That means it was made up. And when the boat finally found me, I was actually sad. I waved goodbye to them all, and I like to think they were waving back as they floated away across the ocean. So why is Joe there? Joe is a scientist. He is part of a team that has been monitoring the temperatures and ice loss in the Arctic over many years. Scientists like Joe from countries all over the world have set up special bases where they live and work at certain times of the year. At the base, they collect data from weather tracking satellites and they watch the movement of the ice. They note how the glaciers move out to sea and the speed they travel. They know that melting ice from the ice sheets will result in rising ocean levels. Huge ships called icebreakers, like the Amundsen shown here, check on the ice sheet each year in the northern seas of Canada. The ship comes to a halt when it finds the ice too thick. On its most recent trip, however, it was able to keep going for the first time. This shows how thin the ice has become. And here is a glossary showing the words that we heard in our story, like base, blizzard, Chukchi, dome, glacier, global warming, iceberg, icebreakers, ice cap, ice sheet, ice shelf, igloo, Inuit, snowmobile, Ward Hunt ice shelf. And thank you very much for finishing the book with me.